Hi. This week, I'm going to call it Bring Forth the Self, Not the Story. I found this piece of paper that I didn't realise I'd thrown away, but it was a session quite a while ago that I shared with you. And it brings to mind that we really are looping in terms of given opportunities over and over again to reflect how to be present and to bring in self. And I'd written on this page, accept self, expanded self, because it went into new expansions. Relax in self, and that which you are arrives effortlessly. We can stay in situations too long, adapt, then not here when it's time to say or to do or to move or to know you're finished with something. Even when things are epic, we can get stuck in the stories of the epic. To be finished with the daily stories that are there all the time is pretty much what this week showed up so beautifully. And how we stop ourselves from creating new aspects of ourselves going forward to enjoy, because without that, there is nothing. Unless you have the ability to sit in the pure nothing and be all. We end up scripting our own lives rather than ourselves scripting our lives. And that really showed up this weekend. I'm going to mention a few and then bring it to what the main theme actually was, because sometimes it's very hard to follow these snappets that are really the depth of someone else's snappet that you may or may not relate to or get or not get. So it can be really confusing, I suppose, to listen to these, but they're put out there so that if something resonates and lights up and you can see yourself more clearly, that's it. So the beginning of the week really was interesting, because it was these two beings came into this world knowing or determined, very, very clear. And with that calling, even at a very young age, of being determined of, I know exactly how I want it, that drivenness of that. Or if you're already born with a sense of knowing and you push it, accidents can happen or backs can freeze up, because somewhere down the line it's going to do something to try and stop you so you can see. And when this pressure of that push was seen in its own being, rather than seeing the world as not matching you or wanting to be something in the world and pushing it, both weren't coming from this absolute effortlessness of it's who you are. Therefore, it will present itself so that you can reveal what that is and enjoy all the gifts that you enjoy in the world coming your way, a very different way. There can be those who literally have everything. And the trouble with that, it can make life very, very difficult. And in this case, has spent quite a long time being sick, but that's back. The health is back. It's extraordinary, the work and effort made to bring self back. But then it still lands with the so what? without interaction, without conversation, without laughter, without others entering into your life or entering into life in one way or another, there's no conversation. There's no, because conversations are conversations with ourselves. And someone came who was in a process of conversation, but the conversation, we had a good laugh. The conversation was whatever it was that's next was going to be entered into wasn't dramatic enough. Because back in 2020, there was so much drama and so much aliveness in it for some people that nothing has matched it since. Interesting, hey? So what was seen is that it wasn't drama. It was the excitement of entering into the world in what they loved to do, what they knew they were in service of, but more than anything, to be and create a community that can celebrate, and never knowing when the next event that can be created, depending on who you meet and who's going to come along, and the excitement of that. And interestingly enough, it was a conversation that was completely digestible. And it was fascinating because in it being completely digestible, the liver actually felt it didn't have a role. And this is in the energetics of it. It's like the liver entered into this new world, wanting to live in this new way that was digestible, and hence not a hindrance at all to the liver. Then it moved more to what I think the real theme for the week is, to some extent, is we can have so many knockbacks in life that we feel that's life. But if you go back, there's a way of claiming the story in a way that serves you and where you can see yourself clearly. Or there is a way of looking at the stories and going, oh God, that's my lot. It's all in what you do up here. And what was seen is the ability to stand in the heat, to forge yourself. And when you go back and you go to circumstances in your life where you stayed in the heat of the fire and you forged yourself and you saw what you were doing at the time and consciously claiming it while your feet were in the fire. Very, very powerful. So, like I mentioned in the first little reading from the last roundabout of this theme, life can become very mundane. You know, the daily habit of, getting the kids off to school, going to work, having to organize the house, making sure that the meals are there. We can get lost in the mundaneness. And in this particular case, a beloved pet had passed. And those of us who've had pets or have pets, there is something that just opens your heart like nothing else when there's an animal in the house. So this energy mundane had become flat. And what was beautiful is that the energy of the animal arrived and said, just add something. Like, put a flower on the table when you have dinner together, or light a candle. Add. It can be a kind word to someone, add. Compliment someone, add. At any point, see if there's something you can add. It's a cantillator. It lifts one up energetically, and then life is not mundane. Life is enjoyable with all these add-ons that you are constantly present to. It's like bringing that animal to the inside and have it there constantly with that energy and adding. And that way we can drop the story of the mundane. That led to someone who's had amazing, joyful experiences and in the past has been extraordinarily capable. If there was something they saw they wanted, the goal was there, the goal was there, the goal was there, and it would arrive. What happened though, when all the goals were arrived, there was an emptiness because what's the next goal? And it took a lot to level that out, to actually be present rather than constantly goal orientated. That was done in the past. And wonderful things have happened, like great, what I call bling in life, bling moments, excuse me, that were extraordinary. And there have been a few in the recent past. And when this being was very goal orientated, like the being I spoke of initially, the back seized up in extraordinarily painful ways, inabilities to move, both of them. And inklings of that was coming back. So it's like, what's this? I certainly don't want to return to that story. And what showed up was life has a habit of doing this. And these are the extraordinary bling moments that this being was actually able to be present in. Sometimes we're in bling moments and we're so outward orientated of how others are doing, we miss our own experience in it. Well, this being had her own experiences in them. It was joyful, so celebratory. But what happens is these times go back to the, carrying wood, chopping water. And what was happening is that with the energy being here, it needed to be seen that's okay, because there'll be many other events moving forward. You don't have to think when these times happen, oh my God, I'm back in the world of the mundane, nothing's happening, my life is boring. They're just rest periods in between, equilibriums. To be in that state all the time may become like that. And then however we progress with that, or I actually myself find that if you walk this middle line, you observe the fabulous times and you observe the more mundane times, and you just live the daily life of, because this can be in a day, you just live the observing of. It's a good practice. So to come to what this week's sharing is really about, are deep-seated habits that have ingrained not just in the mind, but in the spirit. This unresolved whatever it is, which is unresolved self, started to show up. The best way to show that is, okay, we have our structure. Now, and I know this gets mirrored, so I'm going to do it in opposite directions so it looks right for you. There is this spiritual line and there is the mental line. And when we have, at a very young age, ingrained ingrained. I'll give two examples that showed up. We all, one way or another, come from love. And when that love is so deep and profound, deeply profound, to be in the world and not find its match is disheartening, to the point that the heart itself suffers the disheartening. And then having parents in that life that are the contrast in one way or another, or seen as the contrast, it can become that you feel invisible, not seen, and you just have to put up with life. And over many, many decades, how do we see and return back to that which we really are? There was another example where, as a young child, being of migrant parents, dad having a second job, this boy was asked to go along. And being of amazing, generous spirit, which this being is, the Saturdays were sacrificed going to the garden as the second job, and he helped his dad with that. But it started to set in a pattern of putting self aside, which he was spiritually able to do and be generous with. That became a habit. So being that way in spirit can become a habit and can lock into such an extent that the self doesn't get to come in, because it becomes a capacity. It becomes the story we live in rather than the being of self. Then there was a being who was incredibly capable, amazing, awesome, has been told so many, many times by many, many people. Couldn't hear it. And it was interesting because during the session, he really asked me to go to the ear and say, you got to listen to this. You're amazing. Being brought up in a household where one is put down, continuously put down, over and over and over again, to the extent that another sibling actually left, couldn't stand it anymore, but the staying with it, it's this unseen aspect and the extraordinariness. And that was printing out as putting everything in, giving it 200%, 250%, always having to find that little bit that is that capacity, which is quite extraordinary. I know I wouldn't be able to do it. The stories that get created in that are not always easy to overcome, but at some point you need to look at it as it's a story. And then bring in a way of seeing, a way of connecting to self rather than what others see or say, to link to that extraordinary love and start to see through the eyes of love and enjoying seeing through the eyes of love, to see self and enjoy it and not buy into a story. To see the capacity to work, to be generous, to be amazing with other people, not as a job, but to start viewing it as it's who I am. It's how I feel most myself, but it means getting rid of the story so you can pull it through as your way of being. an inner activity of claiming oneself so that one feels present in one's life, and at the end of the day, you feel you've been there. To see oneself as amazing. Now we have neuroplasticity. It will need to be reminded and reminded and reminded. Have stickers around on the fridge, on your bathroom window, in the car. I am amazing. I am amazing. To hear what always could have been spoken, but now speak to yourself so that you can drop the story and bring yourself in. I'm finding that these are not so interesting anymore. The sessions are very much focusing on, I'm not interested in that anymore. Bring self in. So, who are you? Kind, spontaneous, loving, generous, funny, humorous, capacity to be present. So the card that showed up this week was wisdom. Living your knowing and walking your talk. This is turning your knowledge into wisdom. You can do it every day in millions of ways, not just through talking about it. You're always wise. Do not let yourself doubt or undermine your knowing. Be wise in your decisions as you take into account all circumstances. The wisdom of the river of all knowledge is available to you. Be interesting to see how much of that bringing oneself in directly without the story and to enter into the day in that way, who you see yourself to be and how much you enjoy it. Much love.